Hi everyone, welcome to my channel where I talk about how to use your energy to create what you want to see in your world. So today I want to talk about how to learn to trust and use that connection between yourself and your inner being or the larger universe or source. I use all those words for the same thing. So first of all, what is source? Source, or your inner being, is that larger part of yourself, of your own energy, that exists outside your body and is connected with everything else in the universe. There are really two parts of your energy. One is your mind. And more accurately, it's not a part of your energy. Your mind is a perspective that you view life from. So your mind is focused on your physical body and what you can perceive inside your physical body from your senses. So your mind is focused on the physical world. Your mind is when you perceive from a focus of your senses. Source, your inner being, your larger self, your intuition, is when you open up your perception and choose to perceive energetically the world and the situation in the world from a perspective that is connected to everything else. So it's best to make decisions from your inner self because your inner self knows what else is going on in the world. So if you want to make decisions that will benefit you most, you need that information. It's also important to take into account what you perceive through the perspective of your mind, because your mind understands what is going on from the perspective of your physical body. Your mind collates and categorizes and keeps tab on all the information that is coming in from your senses. That's the difference. And of course, if you're only making decisions from your mind, then you're cutting yourself off from so much information that you really need to create a larger, magical type of life. You can survive physically if you are making decisions from the perspective of the mind, because that is what the mind is for. That's what it was designed for, to keep you alive physically. So yes, you can survive physically from the perspective of your mind. You cannot create your dreams and your biggest desires from the perspective of the mind. So first of all, that is a difference. Secondly, how do you develop that trust with your inner self when, for most of us, we have been taught not to trust our inner self and not to trust what we call our intuition? So I want to say that all of the failures of not trusting your intuition can be very beneficial, because that is information too, and eventually will lead you to a place of knowledge where you realize maybe that is not the best way to go. For instance, I existed for many years just making decisions primarily through my mind, and it was not until I was 29 when I was driving down the street in Colorado, and I was thinking to myself, you know, things go badly for me, not just a lot, but like much more than is reasonable. Like, it seems like if I were just to go by chance, things would go better for me most of the time. But it's like a really odd ratio that things go badly for me. And I was driving up to a stoplight that was green, and I said, look at that stoplight, it's green. I bet right as I come up to it, it's going to turn red right now. And the second I said that, it turned red. And that was the first time I thought to myself, wait a minute, maybe more is going on here than I'm aware of. It was the first time that I realized maybe I had more power in creating situations around me than I had previously thought. So that knowledge was really helpful to me, and that is what eventually taught me that I needed to trust the mind. That I needed to trust more than just the mind. I needed to trust some larger perspective, because something else was going on that I did not understand, and it caused me to look at that. The second thing I want to say is developing your relationship with your inner self is like any other relationship. It's not going to happen just like that. There's not a state of trust and mistrust. There's a whole gray area in between. And like any other relationship, it takes time to develop trust. It has taken me 13 years to get to the place where I mostly trust my intuition, and I mostly act on my intuition most of the time. Now, it's not a constant thing. It depends on my emotional state at the time, whether I'm connected with my intuition or not. And experience matters. Basically, the way any trust is built is through experiments and experience over time. So when you have a decision to make, you get information and you say, well, I'll act on this. And then you look at the outcome of that action. And over time, you build a catalog of whether something is working for you or not. So over time, if you're conscious of how you're making a decision and the result of that, that is what will build the trust. The other thing, of course, is it's really important to know the difference about what is an impulse or an idea that comes from the mind versus what is an impulse or an idea that comes from your inner self. And you will not be able to trust your inner self until you know the difference. Now, the way to know the difference is that when you are anxious and fearful and afraid or angry or any of those emotions that we call negative emotions, the ideas that you get at that time are ideas that are coming from your mind. Because the mind is fear-based and it makes decisions based only on what is going to keep you alive at that time. It does not make decisions based on what is the best possible outcome for you and how can you get there. It does not think like that. If you are joyful and happy and relaxed and in a good mood, that is when you get ideas and impulses that come from your inner being. Now, the difference there is that when you become scared, your perspective shrinks down, it narrows down, and all you can see then is from the perspective of the mind. That's why you hear the mind loudest in those states. So when you relax more and you feel more comfortable, you allow your perspective to open up to a larger source of information. And that's why it's in those states that you can hear source more loudly or more clearly. So if you want to learn to trust your inner being or source, it is imperative that you find a way to get yourself into a state of being emotionally where you are connected to source so that you can hear it. So that's the first step. The second step is when you do hear something that you are fairly sure is coming from source, coming from your inner being, then you have to choose to act on it. And then after you act on it, then you record or catalog or remember the results and put that in your memory bank. You don't have to write it down and be all serious about it, but be conscious about what you're doing, where you're making decisions from, and the results of that. And then over time, it will happen. You will have a relationship, and you will know what the difference is between the mind and between inner being or source. And it's that easy. It just takes a lot of time and experiment and trial and error and a lot of getting it wrong and learning from that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for the viewer that asked me that question, because it is a beautiful, perfect question. I hope to see you all again later.